Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive with us. This time we're going to be talking about running shoes. Specifically, Brooks and Hoka. You know those brands that are like everywhere these days? Maybe you're here because you're thinking about a new running challenge, or
hmm
maybe you're thinking about switching brands, or hey, maybe you're just curious about all the hype. Whatever brought you here, we're going to help you find the perfect shoe. And not just any shoe, the perfect shoe for you. We've gone through a ton of expert reviews and real runner feedback. We even talked to some of those running store experts, the ones who've seen it all, you know.
One of the most interesting things about Brooks and Hoka is, well, how much their positions have changed over the years. Brooks has always been a solid brand, but Hoka's journey to the top, that's a story in itself.
Oh, yeah. I remember when Hocus first came out, people were saying they were
Mm,
kind of, well,
Yeah.
unconventional looking, let's just say. But now,
Yeah.
now they're right up there with Brooks.
It's funny though, because I see a lot of runners switching back and forth between the two brands. Like they're searching for the same shoe, but in each brand. That's a really interesting point. It's like both brands offer different solutions, but for the same running needs, which makes comparing them even more interesting. Why don't we start by looking at everyday neutral shoes, those workhorse shoes that everyone needs?
Okay, so the ones that come to mind right away, the Hoka Clifton 9 and the Brooks Ghost. They're both super popular as daily trainers. They're priced pretty similarly, and they both have neutral cushioning. So what makes them stand out from each other?
Well, on the surface, they do seem very similar, but there are these little differences in how they feel, and that can make all the difference for your foot and your stride. The Clifton is known for being really plush, like almost cloud-like, but the Ghost is a little firmer, like it's more grounded.
So it's about more than just how soft or firm the shoe feels.
Mhm.
What makes that feel so different between them?
It all comes down to the type of foam that's used in the midsole. The Clifton uses Hoka's signature foam, EVA foam. It's super plush, like a marshmallow. But the Ghost has Brooks's DNA loft foam, which is soft, but it's a little more responsive.
So the foam changes how the shoe responds when your foot hits the ground. Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about runners who need some extra support? For stability, we've got the Hoka Rahi and the Brooks Adrenaline. I've even heard people say that the Adrenaline is the top seller at some running stores. What makes it so popular?
Well, one thing about the Adrenaline is that it has a pretty firm feel, and a lot of runners really like that, even if they don't need the extra support. Both the Arahi and the Adrenaline have those features that are designed for stability, like that horseshoe shape in the heel.
Right, that horseshoe shape. It helps to keep your foot from rolling inward too much,
Mhm.
which is called overpronation. But some people just like how that extra support feels. So even with stability shoes, you've got different levels of firmness. Now let's talk about maximum cushion shoes, those shoes that feel like walking on clouds. The Hoka Bondi 8 and the Brooks Glycerin. These are the ones that people go for when they want a really comfortable shoe, especially for long runs.
Yeah, definitely. But there's something important to remember about these shoes, both of them, especially the Bondi. They don't have a lot of stability, even though they have a lot of cushioning. It's kind of like sinking into a really comfy couch. It feels good to sit, but not so much if you're trying to do a workout.
So basically you're saying you wouldn't want to run a marathon on a super squishy surface.
Exactly. Because you'd be fighting to stay stable the whole time. And it's the same with shoes.
So for all those runners who love a lot of cushion, just be aware that you might not be getting the stability you need. Now, I know the Bondi has a wider base to give it a bit more support, and the Glycerin uses that special nitrogen-infused foam from Brooks, the DNA Loft. It gives it a more bouncy feel. But at the end of the day, choosing a running shoe isn't just about checking off features. It's got to feel right. It's like when you find the perfect shoe and you just know.
And that's where personal preference really comes in. We've seen runners who absolutely love Hoka. They say it's the most comfortable shoe they've ever worn, especially for walking. But then there are others who say the Brooks Ghost felt really uncomfortable, especially compared to Hoka. It really shows that how a shoe fits. It's totally different for each person.
That's why I love doing these deep dives, because we learn things you wouldn't find just from reading the product description, like how important comfort and fit are, even when there are some issues at first. We read about one runner who had trouble with the tongue of their Brooks trail shoe. It was uncomfortable at first, but then it got better over time. But it shows that finding the right shoe can take time.
And sometimes that process of finding the right shoe, it leads people to get a professional shoe fitting. At a running store, we read about a runner who had tried Brooks and Hoka, but nothing seemed to fit quite right. But they went to a running store and got their feet analyzed. And the expert there recommended Mizuno Wave Inspire 17s. and they said it was a total game changer.
It's like having a detective for your feet.
Exactly.
It's so helpful to have someone who can look at your feet and tell you what kind of shoe you need, especially if you're new to running or if you've been having problems with your shoes. But it seems like even with an expert's help, it really comes down to what you need and what you like. So it's not about being loyal to one brand. It's about finding what works best for your feet and how you run. So what are the most important things someone should think about when they're deciding between Brooks and Hoka?
Well, one of the first things to think about is what kind of running you'll be doing. Will you be on roads or trails, or both?
Hmm.
And do you need a shoe for easy runs or for speed work or for long distances? Or maybe something that can do a little bit of everything. Every shoe is designed with a purpose in mind, so you need to know what you'll be using it for.
That makes sense. Like you wouldn't wear track spikes to go for a jog around the park. Yeah. Now let's talk about all those technical terms we see in shoe descriptions. DNA Loft, DNA Flash, FF Blast, Zoom X. It's like a science experiment. What do all these different foams do for your run?
It is a bit of a science, actually. Each type of foam changes how the shoe feels, like how much cushioning it has and how responsive it is. For example, Brooks's DNA Loft is known for being soft and comfortable, so it's good for easy runs and long distances. But DNA Flash is more responsive, like it gives you more energy back, so it's better for speed work and faster runs.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how all these little details can really make a difference. Now, what about all this hype around plates in running shoes? Especially those carbon plates. Are they really the secret weapon for running faster? Or is there more to it?
Think of a plate like a springboard for your foot. It helps push you forward, and depending on what it's made of, like carbon or nylon, it can make the shoe more or less stiff, and it can change how responsive it feels. Carbon plates have become really popular lately, especially in shoes like the Hoka Carbon X2 and the Brooks Hyperion Elite. They're designed to give you that extra boost for speed work and races, but they also make the shoe feel stiffer, and like it's pushing you forward more.
So not all plates are the same. And they affect more than just how fast you can run. Now, I know not all runners run the same way. Some people land on their heels, some land on the middle of their foot, and some land more on their toes. How does the design of a shoe take that into account?
That's where heel-to-toe drop comes in. It's the difference in height between the heel and the toe of the shoe. A higher drop, like in the Brooks Ghost, is usually good for people who land on their heels, because it gives them more cushioning. But a lower drop, like in the Brooks Catamount Trail shoe, is often better for trail running, and it encourages people to land more on the middle or front of their foot.
So knowing how you run can help you choose the right shoe. What if someone has wider feet? Do they just have to deal with a shoe that doesn't fit well?
Not necessarily. A lot of models come in wide and extra wide sizes, but you have to pay attention to that, especially when you're buying shoes online. Remember, a good fit means the shoe is the right length and width. You don't want your feet to feel squeezed.
Right, comfort is so important. There are so many things to think about, and we've only just started talking about it all. Is there anything else that might help someone decide between Brooks and Hoka?
Well, there are a few more things. Breathability is important, especially if you run in hot weather or if your feet tend to sweat. An upper made of mesh can make a big difference. It'll help keep your feet cool and dry.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And what about water resistance? Some runners have to deal with rain and mud, especially if they're running on trails. Are there shoes that are made for those conditions?
Absolutely. Water resistance is really important for trail runners. Some trail shoes even have waterproof membranes, so your feet stay dry even in the wettest conditions.
Wow. Running shoes are way more complicated than I thought.
There's a lot to think about.
But that's what makes these deep dives so interesting.
It's all about giving you the information you need so you can choose the right shoes for you.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our Brooks versus Hoka deep dive. We talked about how these brands have changed over time, and we went through all the different categories of shoes, and we even got into some of those technical details. But we're not done yet. In part 2, we'll go even deeper. We'll talk about what each brand stands for and what really sets them apart. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Brooks and Hoka.
We've already talked about so much, like how Hoka has become so popular and how important it is to find a shoe that really fits your foot. But I feel like we've only scratched the surface of what makes these brands so different.
You're right. Each brand has its own philosophy, its own way of designing shoes, and its own group of loyal runners. Understanding those differences can really help you choose the right shoe.
So let's get philosophical for a minute. What's at the core of each brand? What makes a Brooks shoe a Brooks and a Hoka shoe a Hoka?
Brooks is all about a smooth, classic ride. They really focus on how the body moves, and they use technology to help your natural stride and make the shoe comfortable and consistent. It's like they take what works and then add a little bit of innovation.
So Brooks is like that friend who's always reliable, always up for a good time, no drama, just solid performance.
Exactly. Now, Hoka is different. They have a more maximalist approach. They're known for their bold designs, and they really prioritize cushioning. They want you to feel like you're floating.
So Hoka is that friend who's always pushing the limits, always trying new things, and always making a statement. I love that analogy. It really captures the spirit of each brand. But beyond the philosophy, what are the actual design elements that make them different?
Let's talk about midsoles. The midsole is the most important part of a running shoe. Brooks uses a bunch of different foam technologies, like DNA Loft and DNA Flash, to create different levels of cushioning and responsiveness. They also have features like segmented crash pads and guide rails. Those help to make the shoe more stable and to make your stride smoother.
So Brooks is like the engineer, carefully designing every part of the shoe to make it perform well and feel comfortable.
Exactly. Now, Hoka is famous for its thick midsoles. They often use that super cushioned EVA foam, and they use something called a rocker geometry. That's what gives Hoka shoes that curved sole. That curve helps you to roll smoothly as you run.
So that's why people say Hokas feel like running on clouds. It's like Hoka is the artist, shaping the shoe to create a unique experience.
And that artistic approach carries over to the uppers of Hoka shoes, too. They often use breathable mesh with very few overlays, so the shoe feels light and airy. Brooks also focuses on breathability, but they tend to use upples that are a little more structured, so they provide more support and they last longer.
So Hoka is like the minimalist, stripping away everything that's not necessary.
Yeah,
And Brooks is the pragmatist, finding that balance between looks and function.
I think that's a good way to put it. And all these design choices, they reflect the different types of runners that each brand appeals to.
So who's the ideal Brooks runner? And who's drawn to Hoka food?
Brooks runners tend to appreciate a smooth, consistent ride. They like stability and durability. They might be marathoners who run a lot of miles on the road, or they might just want a shoe that's comfortable and reliable for their everyday runs.
That makes sense. What about Hoka? Who's attracted to that maximalist style?
Hoka runners love that super cushioned floating feeling, and they're not afraid to stand out. They might be ultramarathoners or trail runners or anyone who really prioritizes comfort and wants to protect their joints.
So it's not just about the shoe itself, it's about the runner's personality, their running style, their whole vibe.
Exactly. And that's what makes this comparison so interesting. There's no one right answer. It's all about finding the shoe that fits your needs and your preferences. But let's be honest, there are so many shoes out there, it can be really overwhelming to know where to start.
That's what this deep dive is all about. We're giving you the information you need to understand the key differences between Brooks and Hoka. From their design philosophies to their specific technologies, now it's time to put that knowledge into action. What can our listeners do right now to make a decision? Give us the game plan.
First, think about how you run. Do you land on your heel, the middle of your foot, or your toes? That will affect what kind of heel-to-toe drop you need and the overall design of the shoe.
Right, no more just following trends. It's about understanding your own body and how you run.
Next, think about your goals and what kind of running you'll be doing. Are you training for a marathon? Or hitting the trails? Or just going for easy runs? The intensity and the terrain will play a big role in what kind of shoe you choose.
So you're saying choose a shoe based on what you're going to use it for.
Exactly.
I like.
And don't forget about fit. Go to a good running store and try on shoes. Get a professional fitting if you can. Pay attention to how the shoe feels in terms of length and width. And don't be afraid to try different sizes and models. What feels good to one person might not feel good to you.
A good fit is so important. Don't force your feet into shoes that don't feel right.
And finally, read reviews and testimonials. See what other runners have to say about the shoes you're interested in, and see if their experiences match your needs and preferences. It's like getting advice from the whole running community.
So it's like crowdsourcing your shoe decision.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey, not a race. Don't be afraid to try different shoes, experiment with different brands, and find the pair that makes you feel confident and comfortable, and ready to reach your running goals.
That's a great way to put it. We've given you the knowledge and the tools to find your perfect match. We've explored the philosophies, the technology, and the practical things to consider when choosing between these two big running brands. But before we wrap up, we have one final thought to leave you with, something to think about as you start your search for the perfect shoe.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so we're back for the last part of our deep dive into Brooks and Hoka. You said you had a thought-provoking question for our listeners, right? One that would make them really think about what they want in a running shoe.
Yeah, I do. Imagine your perfect run. The weather is perfect, the scenery is beautiful, and your body is just moving effortlessly. Now think about the shoes you're wearing on that run. What do they feel like? What features stand out to you?
Well, I like that. It's like a vision board, but for your feet. But why is that visualization so important?
Because it helps us understand why we choose certain shoes. It's not just about the technical stuff, it's about the feeling, the experience, the way the shoe enhances our joy of running.
So it's about the emotional side of the decision, not just the practical side.
Exactly. It's about realizing that our running shoes, they're more than just equipment. They're part of us. They're our partners in fitness and well-being.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. It makes choosing shoes feel more meaningful.
And once you have that vision of your perfect run, you can narrow down your choices.
So like working backwards from your dream run to the perfect shoe.
Yeah. If you imagine yourself running a marathon effortlessly, you'll probably want a shoe with a lot of cushioning and energy return. But if you see yourself conquering tough trails, you'll need a shoe that's durable and has good traction.
And if you just want a comfortable shoe for walking, then comfort and versatility are most important.
Right. It's all about knowing yourself and what you want to achieve.
Okay, so for everyone listening, as you start looking for your next pair of shoes, remember to visualize your perfect run. Think about what you need, what you like, and don't be afraid to try different things.
And have fun. Finding new running shoes should be an exciting experience.
Yeah, it's like a treasure hunt for your feet. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Brooks and Hoka.
It was great being here.
Until next time, happy running.